parents excluded my daughter from a $1,000 park trip. Stepkids don't count, she cried watching her siblings pack. I stayed calm and called my bank. The next morning, I woke up to Mom frantically banging on my door. The sound of my 8-year-old daughter sobbing in her bedroom cut through me like a knife. Madison sat on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, watching through the window as her grandmother helped my half-siblings load suitcases into the van. 3 days at Starlight Park, the premier amusement destination 2 states over, complete with a new water park expansion everyone had been talking about for months. Every kid except mine. I knocked softly before entering. Madison looked up at me with red, swollen eyes that broke something fundamental inside my chest. She had been so excited when Grandma Ruth first mentioned the trip 6 weeks ago at Sunday dinner. She had circled the date on her calendar with a purple marker, crossing off each day as it approached. "Why doesn't Grandma want me to go?" Her voice came out small and fractured. I sat beside her on the bed, pulling her close. Through the window, I could see my mother directing traffic while my stepfather Kenneth loaded coolers into the trunk. My half-sister Brittany, 16, was taking selfies by the van. My half-brother Tyler, 14, was already in the back seat with headphones on. Both of them had been insufferable about this trip for weeks, posting countdown stories and making elaborate packing lists. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Is it because my daddy isn't here anymore?" The question gutted me. Madison's father, my late husband James, had died in a construction accident when she was 4. We had moved back to my hometown afterward because I needed help, needed family, needed something familiar to anchor us while we rebuilt our shattered lives. My parents had seemed supportive at first. My mother had cooed over Madison, praised her art projects, attended her school concerts. But things had shifted after my mother married Kenneth 2 years ago. Suddenly there were new grandchildren, real grandchildren according to the whispered conversations I wasn't supposed to overhear. Kenneth's kids from his previous marriage became the priority. Madison went from beloved granddaughter to awkward addition, the reminder of my first marriage that didn't quite fit into their blended family vision. Kenneth wasn't my stepfather in any real sense. I had been a grown woman with a child of my own when he married my mother, but he certainly acted like he had authority over our family decisions. "Your daddy would want you to know that you're perfect exactly as you are." Through the window, I watched my mother walk back toward the house. I kissed Madison's forehead and went downstairs to intercept her in the kitchen. She was checking items off a printed list, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Madison is really hurt," I said without preamble. My mother didn't look up from her list. "I explained this to you last week, Angela. The tickets are expensive, and Kenneth is paying for his children. It wouldn't be fair to ask him to cover Madison too. You could pay for her. Or I could pay for her ticket. The hotel rooms are already arranged. 2 rooms, 2 kids per room with us. The math doesn't work." I felt my jaw tighten. "You could get another room. You could make it work if you wanted to." Finally, she looked up, and her expression was cool, detached. "Angela, I love Madison, but she's not Kenneth's granddaughter. This is a trip for his grandchildren. It's not personal. She's your granddaughter. And I see her all the time. Brittany and Tyler split their time between households. This trip is special for them." The rationalization was so smooth, so practiced, that I knew she had rehearsed this conversation. My mother had always been good at making cruelty sound reasonable. Growing up, she had perfected the art of cutting remarks delivered with a smile, a favoritism disguised as fairness. She's 8 years old and she's upstairs crying because her grandmother is excluding her from a family trip. My mother set down her list with an exasperated sigh. "You're being dramatic. Madison will understand when she's older. Stepkids don't count the same way in these situations. That's just reality." The words hung in the air between us. Stepkids don't count. Never mind that Madison wasn't even a stepkid, she was a biological grandchild. Never mind that she was a child who had already lost her father and now was learning that her grandmother's love came with conditions. I walked out of the kitchen without another word. My mother called after me, something about not being unreasonable, but I was already climbing the stairs back to Madison's room. She was lying on her bed now, face pressed into her pillow. The weight of the moment pressed down on me. This wasn't the first time my mother had shown preference for Kenneth's children, but it was the most blatant. Last Christmas, Brittany and Tyler had each received lavish gifts, new laptops and designer clothes, while Madison got a generic craft kit from the discount store. My mother had explained it away by saying Kenneth had contributed to his kids' gifts, implying I should have done the same if I wanted Madison to receive equivalent presents. Then there was Madison's dance recital in April. My mother had confirmed she would attend, even marked it on her calendar in front of us. But the morning of the performance, she called to cancel. Kenneth was taking Brittany to visit a college campus 3 hours away, and my mother decided to go along. She promised to catch the next recital, but the damage was done. Madison had scanned the audience during her performance, searching for her grandmother's face, and I watched her expression fall when she realized the seat remained empty. I had made excuses for my mother then. She was adjusting to married life. She was trying to bond with Kenneth's children. She would find her balance eventually. But standing in that kitchen, hearing her actually speak those words aloud, "Stepkids don't count," shattered any illusion I had been clinging to about her intentions. I walked out of the kitchen without another word. My mother called after me, something about not being unreasonable, but I was already climbing the stairs back to Madison's room. She was lying on her bed now, face pressed into her pillow. The weight of the moment pressed down on me. This wasn't the first time my mother had shown preference for Kenneth's children, but it was the most blatant. Last Christmas, Brittany and Tyler had each received lavish gifts, new laptops and designer clothes, while Madison got a generic craft kit from the discount store. My mother had explained it away by saying Kenneth had contributed to his kids' gifts, implying I should have done the same if I wanted Madison to receive equivalent presents. Then there was Madison's dance recital in April. My mother had confirmed she would attend, even marked it on her calendar in front of us. But the morning of the performance, she called to cancel. Kenneth was taking Brittany to visit a college campus 3 hours away, and my mother decided to go along. She promised to catch the next recital, but the damage was done. Madison had scanned the audience during her performance, searching for her grandmother's face, and I watched her expression fall when she realized the seat remained empty. I had made excuses for my mother then. She was adjusting to married life. She was trying to bond with her stepchildren. She would find her balance eventually. But standing in that kitchen, hearing her actually speak those words aloud, "Stepkids don't count," shattered any illusion I had been clinging to about her intentions. "How about we have our own adventure this weekend?" I suggested, keeping my voice light despite the rage simmering beneath my skin. "We could go to that new trampoline park you mentioned. Maybe have a sleepover in the living room with movies and pizza." Madison sat up slightly. "Really? Really? Just us girls? We'll make it special." She managed a small smile, though the hurt still lingered in her eyes. I helped her pick out a movie from her collection, then went to my bedroom and closed the door. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. For the past 3 years, I had been the responsible one. After James died, his life insurance payout and the settlement from the construction company had been substantial. I had invested most of it for Madison's future, but I had also set up a trust for my mother after she married Kenneth. My mother had been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's disease 5 years ago, and the medications were expensive even with insurance. Kenneth's income as a regional manager was decent but not enough to cover the mounting medical bills, especially after he took on child support obligations for Brittany and Tyler. My father had died when I was 12, a sudden heart attack that had devastated our small family. My mother had worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and I remembered those lean years with painful clarity. When she was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I knew I had to help. After she married Kenneth, it became clear his income was stretched thin between 2 households. The trust had felt like the right thing to do, a way to honor both her sacrifices and James's memory. He had always been generous, always thinking about how to help others. The trust had been funding her neurologist appointments, her physical therapy sessions, her increasingly expensive medication regimen. Without it, she would have to rely entirely on Kenneth's income and her limited disability payments. The math didn't work in her favor. I had known that when I set it up, had designed it specifically to give her security and peace of mind. $50,000 I had placed in a trust with specific termination provisions, structured to pay out $2,000 monthly to cover her medication costs and therapy appointments. It had been my way of ensuring my mother would be taken care of, my gesture of love and responsibility as her daughter. But sitting there in my bedroom, Thinking about Madison's tear-stained face, something inside me hardened. My mother had made a choice about who mattered in her family hierarchy. Perhaps it was time she understood that choices carry consequences. Stepkids don't count. I opened my banking app and navigated to the trust management section. My attorney, Gerald Hutchinson, had helped me set up the structure. He had been James's college roommate and had handled our estate planning after the accident. I sent him a text message. Need to discuss the trust for my mother. Available tomorrow morning? His response came within minutes. 9 a.m. at my office? Perfect. I spent the evening making popcorn and watching animated movies with Madison. She curled against me on the couch, and I stroked her hair while forcing myself to smile through the credits. Outside, I heard the van pull out of the driveway. My mother hadn't even knocked to say goodbye. After Madison fell asleep, I stayed up researching. I pulled up the trust documents on my laptop and reviewed every clause Gerald had included. He had been thorough, as always. The trust had specific termination provisions built in, including circumstances like breach of family relationship, dissolution of need, or beneficiary misconduct. At the time, I thought those provisions were just legal protections, standard safeguards I would never actually need to invoke. Beneficiary misconduct. The phrase seemed almost quaint when we had drafted it 2 years ago. Gerald had defined it broadly to include actions that materially harmed the grantor's immediate family or violated fundamental family obligations. He had been thinking about financial exploitation or abuse scenarios. Neither of us had imagined I would be using it because my mother excluded my daughter from a theme park trip. But the more I read, the more I realized this qualified. My mother's actions had caused substantial emotional distress to Madison. They had violated the implicit understanding that establishing this trust was predicated on our continued close family relationship, one that included Madison as a full and valued member. The exclusion was deliberate, calculated, and justified with explicit language about stepchildren not counting. I drafted an email to Gerald outlining the situation. I kept it factual, unemotional, laying out the timeline of events and including screenshots of text messages where my mother had dismissed my concerns. I hit send at 1 a.m, then finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I was about to do. This would hurt my mother. Genuinely hurt her. The Parkinson's was progressive, and without the trust funds, she would face impossible choices about which treatments to pursue and which medications to skip. Kenneth's salary could cover their basic living expenses and some medical costs, but the specialty medications and therapy sessions that ran close to $3,000 monthly would be out of reach. Part of me felt cruel even considering this action. But another part, the part that had held my sobbing daughter and explained why Grandma didn't want her on the trip, felt absolutely certain this was necessary. My mother needed to understand that Madison was not optional, not secondary, not a stepchild who didn't count. She was my daughter, my priority, and anyone who couldn't treat her with basic decency and inclusion would face consequences. I thought about James, about what he would say if he were here. He had always been protective of Madison, fiercely loving in a way that made everyone around him feel safe. He would have confronted my mother immediately, probably with less restraint than I had shown. He wouldn't have tolerated this situation for a moment. The next morning, I woke to Madison eating cereal at the kitchen table, still in her pajamas. I had just poured my coffee when someone started pounding on the front door. The knocking was frantic, continuous, the sound of panic. I opened the door to find my mother on the porch. Her face was pale, her hands trembling worse than usual. Kenneth stood behind her, phone pressed to his ear, looking furious. "What did you do?" my mother demanded, pushing past me into the house. "Good morning to you too. Don't play games with me, Angela. I got a notification from the pharmacy that my prescription can't be filled. My account shows zero balance. What did you do?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. Madison had stopped eating, her spoon frozen halfway to her mouth. I smiled at her reassuringly before turning back to my mother. "I dissolved the trust." My mother's face went from pale to crimson. "You can't do that. That money is for my medication." "Actually, I can. Gerald helped me set it up with a revocation clause. I met with him yesterday morning and signed the dissolution papers. The remaining balance, roughly $43,000, has been transferred back to my primary investment account." Kenneth stepped forward, his jaw clenched. Your mother needs that money for her health. My mother just told me that stepkids don't count. I assume that means stepparents don't count either. You're not my father, Kenneth. My father died when I was 12. You married my mother 2 years ago. By her own logic, I have no obligation to fund your household expenses. This is insane, my mother sputtered. I'm your mother. You can't just abandon me. Interesting choice of words. Abandon. Like excluding an 8-year-old from a family trip because she doesn't fit your new family structure? That's completely different. Is it? You made a choice about who counts as family. I'm simply respecting that boundary. Madison and I are our own family unit. We'll allocate our resources accordingly. My mother sank onto the couch, her hands shaking badly now. I felt a flicker of guilt, but then I remembered Madison's face, the way she had asked if it was because her daddy wasn't here anymore. I can't afford my medications without that money, my mother said, her voice breaking. The Parkinson's is progressing. The new neurologist wants to try a different treatment protocol, but insurance only covers part of it. You should have thought about that before you decided my daughter wasn't worth a theme park ticket. Kenneth's face had gone from angry to calculating. We can include Madison on the trip. We'll figure out the room situation. The trip is happening right now. You're already 2 hours down the highway. And more importantly, I don't want Madison anywhere near you people. She deserves better than grandparents who only value her when it's financially convenient for them. My mother was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Please, Angela. I made a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking very clearly. You even rehearsed your justification. Stepkids don't count, remember? That wasn't a slip of the tongue. That was a policy decision. I'll apologize to Madison. We'll plan a special trip just for her. No. The single word landed like a hammer. My mother looked up at me, shock replacing the tears. Madison doesn't need your pity trips or your guilt-motivated attention. She needs stability and people who love her unconditionally. Since you've made it clear that's not you, we'll be keeping our distance going forward. You can't keep my granddaughter from me. Watch me. I'm done exposing my child to your conditional love and casual cruelty. You want to play favorites with Kenneth's kids? Fine. Do it on your own dime. Kenneth pulled out his phone, tapping aggressively at the screen. I'm calling my lawyer. You can't do this. That trust was established for medical expenses. Call whoever you want. The trust was established by my money, from my late husband's estate, as a gift to my mother. It includes termination provisions for beneficiary misconduct. I have texts, emails, and recorded conversations documenting your wife's pattern of favoritism and her explicit statement that stepkids don't count. Good luck arguing that I have a legal obligation to fund someone who treats my daughter as less than. Kenneth's face went through several expressions before settling on barely contained fury. He started to say something, stopped, then tried again. This is extortion. You're holding medical care hostage over a theme park trip. No, I'm allocating my late husband's estate according to our actual family values. James died providing for his daughter. He would be horrified to know I was using his money to support people who treat her as disposable. We never said she was disposable, my mother protested weakly. You said stepkids don't count. Madison isn't even a stepkid, she's your biological granddaughter. But apparently that doesn't matter because she comes from my first marriage, the one that ended in tragedy instead of divorce. She's an inconvenient reminder that I had a life before you married Kenneth. My mother flinched, but Kenneth was still focused on his phone, presumably texting his attorney. I wondered what he expected to accomplish. The law was clear on this. I had no legal obligation to support my mother financially. The trust had been voluntary, established out of love and concern. Both emotions were now in serious question. You'll regret this, Kenneth said, looking up from his phone. When your mother's health deteriorates, when she can't afford her treatments, you'll have to live with knowing you caused it. No, you'll have to live with knowing your insistence on excluding my daughter caused it. You pushed for this trip structure. You convinced my mother that your kids deserved special treatment. You created this situation, and now you're facing the financial consequences of your choices. My mother stood up abruptly, swaying slightly. I could fall. I could get hurt. If I can't afford my medications, My condition will deteriorate. Then I suggest you and Kenneth adjust your budget. Cancel the $1,000 theme park trip. Cut back on Brittany's competition dance expenses. Sell Kenneth's boat. There are options that don't involve my money. That boat is for family bonding. And there it is. Family bonding for your preferred family members. The ones who count. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. Madison had abandoned her cereal and was watching from the kitchen doorway, her eyes wide. I walked over and put my arm around her shoulders. Madison and I have plans today. You should probably get back on the road if you want to meet up with Brittany and Tyler. I'm sure they're wondering where you are. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, she looked at Madison, and something in her expression softened. Madison, sweetheart, I'm sorry. Grandma made a mistake. Madison pressed closer to me. She didn't respond, just stared at the grandmother who had broken her heart. Kenneth grabbed my mother's arm. Come on, Ruth. We'll figure this out later. They left, and I closed the door behind them. Madison looked up at me with confused eyes. Why was Grandma crying? Sometimes people get upset when they face consequences for their choices. Are we still going to the trampoline park? Absolutely. The next few days were blissfully quiet. My mother called 17 times. I answered none of them. Kenneth sent a series of increasingly aggressive texts threatening legal action. I forwarded them all to Gerald, who assured me there was no legal ground for them to stand on. The trust had been properly established with appropriate termination provisions, and I had every right to dissolve it under the misconduct clause. I received a visit from my Aunt Paula, my mother's younger sister, 3 days after the confrontation. She showed up at my office during lunch, her expression carefully neutral. Paula had always been the mediator in our family, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found middle ground. Your mother is a wreck, Paula said, sliding into the chair across from my desk. She should be. Angela, I know she messed up. But cutting off her medical funding? That's extreme. I set down my sandwich and looked at my aunt directly. Did she tell you what she said? Did she explain why Madison wasn't invited on the trip? Paula shifted uncomfortably. She said it was complicated. Something about room arrangements and Kenneth's kids. She said stepkids don't count. Those were her exact words. She looked me in the eye and told me that my daughter, her granddaughter, didn't qualify as real family because she's from my first marriage. My aunt's face went pale. She actually said that? Yes. And this isn't the first incident. It's just the most blatant. Madison has been steadily demoted in the family hierarchy since Mom married Kenneth. Smaller gifts at Christmas. Forgotten recitals. Excluded from family photos at Kenneth's daughter's sweet 16 party. I kept making excuses, kept telling myself Mom was adjusting to her new marriage. But this trip made it clear. Madison is not a priority. She's an afterthought at best. Paula rubbed her temples. I didn't know it was that bad. Because Mom presents it as reasonable boundary setting or fair treatment of all the grandkids. But it's not fair. Brittany and Tyler have 2 involved sets of grandparents. Madison has me and a grandmother who treats her like an obligation. Had a grandmother like that, actually. Past tense. So you're just done? No chance for her to make amends? I leaned back in my chair. I'm open to actual change. Not apologies, not promises, but concrete behavioral change over time. If Mom wants to prove Madison matters to her, she can do that without my money. And if she can't be bothered to change without financial incentive, then she never really valued Madison at all. Paula nodded slowly. That's fair, actually. Harsh, but fair. I'm tired of protecting Madison from the people who are supposed to love her. James died, and she lost her father. She shouldn't have to lose her grandmother too, but not like this. Not with conditions and hierarchies and constant reminders that she's not quite good enough. My aunt reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. You're a good mother, Angela. Madison is lucky to have you. After Paula left, I sat at my desk thinking about luck. Madison wasn't lucky. She had lost her father at 4 years old. She had a grandmother who ranked her below step-siblings. She was growing up without half the family support most kids took for granted. But she had me, and I would move mountains to make sure she knew she was valued and loved and enough exactly as she was. On Monday, my mother showed up at my office. I worked as a marketing consultant for a mid-sized firm downtown, and she appeared in the lobby looking smaller than I remembered. The receptionist, Tamara, buzzed my desk with an apologetic tone. "Your mother is here? She says it's urgent." I considered turning her away, but curiosity won out. I went down to the lobby and found her sitting in one of the modern chairs, her purse clutched in her lap. "You have 5 minutes," I said, not sitting down. She stood up quickly. "Can we talk somewhere private?" I led her to a small conference room and closed the door. She sat down heavily, and I remained standing. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About what you said. About Madison. About my behavior. And? You're right. I've been treating her differently since I married Kenneth. I told myself it was about fairness, about not favoring one set of grandkids over another. But really, I was trying so hard to build this new family with Kenneth that I pushed aside the family I already had." I crossed my arms. Madison is not a consolation prize. She's not something you get to pick up and put down based on your current relationship status. "I know. I see that now." When Kenneth and I got back to the hotel that first night, Brittany asked where Madison was. She was confused about why she wasn't invited. I realized I hadn't even asked Brittany and Tyler if they wanted their cousin there. I just assumed Kenneth wanted it to be his kids only. "Did you?" My mother looked down at her hands. "No. Kenneth suggested it, and I went along. He said it would be simpler, less complicated. He was worried about the expense. I let him make that call because I didn't want to rock the boat in our new marriage." "So you sacrificed your granddaughter's feelings to keep your husband happy?" "Yes. And that was wrong. I can see that now. But Angela, I need that medication. The tremors are getting worse. I had to stop driving last week because I couldn't trust my hands on the wheel." For the first time, I felt the anger crack slightly. My mother looked genuinely scared, genuinely remorseful. But I also knew that fear of consequences wasn't the same as genuine understanding. "What would you have done if I didn't have money?" I asked. "If James hadn't left us that settlement? If I was struggling to pay my own bills? Would you have treated Madison better, or would she just have been the poor granddaughter you felt obligated to tolerate?" My mother flinched. "I don't know. Maybe I would have made different choices. Maybe I wouldn't have. At least that's honest. I want to fix this. Tell me how to fix this." I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "You can't fix it. Not quickly, anyway. Madison trusted you, and you broke that trust. You looked her in the eye and told her she wasn't good enough to be included in your family activities. That kind of damage doesn't heal because you suddenly realize you need something from me. So what, you're just going to cut me off? Let me deteriorate? I'm considering my options. But here's what I know for certain: any financial support I provide going forward will be tied to genuine behavioral change, not just words. And Madison comes first. Always. If I even suspect you're playing nice to get money while still treating her as lesser than, we're done. Permanently." My mother nodded slowly. "What would behavioral change look like to you?" "Therapy. Family therapy, specifically. You, me, Madison, and a professional who can help navigate this situation. Individual therapy for you to work through why you find it so easy to play favorites with children. And concrete actions, not promises. I want to see you prioritizing Madison consistently over time before I consider reinstating any financial support." "How long?" "As long as it takes. Maybe 6 months. Maybe a year. Maybe never, if you can't actually change." She looked stricken, but she nodded. "Okay. I'll do it. Whatever it takes." I stood up. "I'll send you some therapist recommendations. Your first appointment should be scheduled within 2 weeks. Send me proof of the appointment. If you cancel or don't show up, we're done talking." My mother stood as well, reaching out as if to hug me, then thinking better of it. "Thank you for giving me a chance. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because Madison deserves grandparents who actually love her. If you can become that person, great. If not, we'll build our family from people who already know how to love unconditionally." Over the next several weeks, my mother surprised me. She scheduled not one but two therapy appointments per week, individual and family sessions. She sent me the receipts, the appointment confirmations, even session notes when her therapist agreed to share them. Kenneth, to his credit, also started attending sessions. I maintained my distance during the first month, watching from the sidelines as my mother did the work. She sent Madison cards in the mail, not expensive or elaborate, just simple notes saying she was thinking of her. She asked permission before showing up, respected my boundaries, and didn't push for more access than I was willing to grant. The individual therapy seemed to be forcing my mother to confront patterns I don't think she had fully acknowledged before. According to the session notes her therapist shared after 6 weeks, they were exploring my mother's relationship with her own mother, my grandmother Dorothy, who had passed away when I was 16. Apparently, there were parallels I hadn't known about. My grandmother had remarried late in life to a man with adult children. My mother, who was already married to my father at that point, had felt sidelined during holiday gatherings and family events. She had confided to her therapist about feeling like she had to compete for her own mother's attention, about watching her mother prioritize her step-siblings' needs and celebrations. The irony was almost painful. My mother had experienced exactly what she was now putting Madison through, and somehow she had still fallen into the same pattern. The therapist's notes indicated this realization had been devastating for my mother. She had cried through an entire session when she finally connected the dots. Gerald called me 10 weeks into my mother's therapy journey. "I've been getting calls from Kenneth's attorney," he said. "Just harassment, nothing substantive. But I wanted to give you a heads up that they're not dropping this quietly." "What are they threatening?" "Grandparents' rights, mostly. Claiming you're interfering with an established relationship between Madison and her grandmother. It's nonsense, legally speaking. Grandparents' rights are notoriously difficult to establish, especially when the custodial parent is fit and the child's other parent is deceased. You have complete discretion. But they're trying to intimidate me." "Yes. I'd recommend documenting everything. Keep records of the therapy appointments your mother is attending, any contact she has with Madison, any communication from Kenneth. If this somehow makes it to court, which I doubt, we want a complete picture." I started a folder on my laptop, methodically organizing screenshots, emails, and notes. Part of me was angry that Kenneth was turning this into a legal battle. Another part of me appreciated having concrete documentation of my mother's efforts to change. 3 months after the confrontation, I agreed to the first family therapy session with Madison. My daughter sat curled in the oversized chair, barely looking at her grandmother. The therapist, Dr. Vanessa Palmer, was patient and skilled, creating space for Madison to express her hurt without pressure to forgive. "I thought you didn't love me anymore," Madison said at one point, her voice barely above a whisper. My mother's face crumpled. "Oh, sweetheart, I do love you. I made terrible choices, but I never stopped loving you. Then why did you leave me behind?" It was the question my mother had been avoiding, and Dr. Palmer didn't let her escape it. My mother struggled through an explanation about trying too hard to please Kenneth, about falling into old patterns of favoritism from her own childhood, about being afraid of losing her new marriage. "None of that is Madison's fault," Dr. Palmer pointed out gently. "What is your responsibility here? To put Madison first. To make sure she knows she's valued and loved, regardless of my relationship with Kenneth." We had 6 more sessions over the next 2 months. Slowly, carefully, Madison started to soften. My mother showed up consistently, brought thoughtful gifts that reflected actual attention to Madison's interests, and started planning one-on-one activities. She took Madison to art classes, to the children's museum, to the botanical gardens. I watched carefully for signs that it was performative, that she was just checking boxes to get her money back. But something in my mother had genuinely shifted. She talked openly in therapy about her own mother's favoritism, about how she had sworn she would never repeat those patterns, only to fall into them anyway. Kenneth came to our house to apologize directly to Madison. He knelt down to her level and spoke simply. "I made your grandmother choose between making me happy and making you happy. That was wrong. You deserved better." Brittany and Tyler also reached out. They video called Madison and apologized for not speaking up during the trip planning. Brittany sent a care package with friendship bracelets she had made. Tyler sent a stuffed animal from the theme park gift shop. 5 months after that morning confrontation, I sat down with Gerald to discuss the trust situation. My mother's medical bills were mounting, and I could see the strain in her face during our weekly dinners. The behavioral change seems genuine, Gerald observed. But you need to protect yourself and Madison legally. If you reinstate the trust, we should add specific conditions. We drafted a new trust agreement. This one included mandatory monthly family therapy sessions, a requirement that Madison be included in all major family events unless she chose not to attend, and a provision that any future favoritism or exclusion would trigger immediate termination. Additionally, the monthly payout was reduced to $1,500 instead of $2,000, with the difference going into a separate account for Madison's future. I presented the terms to my mother over coffee at her house. She read through them carefully, and I watched her absorb each condition. "These are fair," she said finally. "More than fair, considering what I did. If you violate any of these terms, the trust dissolves permanently. No second chances." "I understand." She signed the documents, and I had them notarized. Within a week, the pharmacy called to confirm her prescriptions were covered again. My mother cried when she called to thank me. 6 months later, we hosted Madison's 9th birthday party at our house. My mother and Kenneth arrived early to help set up decorations. Brittany and Tyler came with thoughtful gifts and played games with the younger kids. When it came time to sing happy birthday, my mother stood beside Madison with her arm around her shoulders, both of them grinning at the ridiculous number of candles I had crammed onto the cake. Later, after the guests had left and Madison was upstairs playing with her new toys, my mother and I cleaned up the wrapping paper and plates. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not giving up on me. I didn't do it for you. I did it for Madison." "I know. But still. You could have just walked away. You had every right to." I tied off a garbage bag and looked at her. Madison lost her father. She didn't need to lose her grandmother too. But she needed a grandmother who actually valued her, not one who saw her as optional. I see her now. Really see her. She's remarkable. She always was. You just weren't paying attention. My mother nodded, accepting the rebuke. I'm trying to do better. Every day. That's all anyone can ask. We finished cleaning in companionable silence. Through the window, I could see Kenneth teaching Madison and Tyler how to throw a football in the backyard. Madison's laugh drifted through the open window, genuine and free. Sometimes people say blood is thicker than water. But the full phrase is actually the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The family we choose, the bonds we forge through commitment and respect, matter more than genetic connections. My mother had learned that lesson the hard way, and it had cost her dearly. But she had learned it. That was what mattered. Madison came running inside, sweaty and breathless. "Mom. Grandma. Did you see me catch the ball? I caught it 3 times." My mother swept her into a hug, tremors and all. "I saw, sweetheart. You were amazing." Madison beamed, secure in her grandmother's affection. This time, I knew it was real. It had taken financial consequences and months of therapy, but my mother had finally understood what I had been trying to tell her all along: family isn't about convenience or new marriages or keeping score. It's about showing up. Consistently. Unconditionally. Especially for the children who depend on us to make them feel valued. And if you can't do that, then you don't deserve the privilege of being called family at all.